Hey, welcome to the Lough Derg Podcast. I'm Marcas. I'm the coordinator of Pastoral Programmes at Lough Derg. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by our prior, Father Flynn. Together, we'll explore a fragment of Lough Derg's fascinating history and its living significance for pilgrims from around Ireland and indeed from around the world. So, just to begin, then, Father can you tell us a little bit about your own background, your connection with Lough Derg, and what brought you to Lough Derg as prior then?
Well, Marcus, my background is I'm from County Fermanagh in Ireland, Diocese of Clogher here, the little rural parish of Rosslea, which is at the east end of County Fermanagh, about 50 miles from here. And growing up there in the 1950s, even as a boy, Lough Derg was in the ether. I mean, you people talked about Lough Derg, and you heard about, oh, so and so is doing Lough Derg, and I first did the pilgrimage myself in 1967, I think it was, the year that I did my O levels at second level secondary school. Two friends and I, three of us did it together. And I suppose since then I have done it most years, not every year, but most years. And I have worked on Lough Derg since my first year to work there was 1978, when I was 2 years ordained. Bishop at the time asked me to fill in for one of the regular priests uh, who was doing exams, had been doing a course and was doing exams. So I was there a few times in the course of that season, and then from the following season, 79, I for I more or less became a regular member on the team. Uh, I'm prior here now for the past 7 seasons, and prior is the term we use for the priest who's leading the pilgrimage. So I followed Father Owen, who had given it 4 years. Before that, Father Dick Moan, Senior Dick Moan, had been prior for, gosh, from about 1990 to 2013, maybe the most of a quarter century. And I'd worked with Dick over the years, and before that, then with Father McSorley, and who happily is still alive, an aged man now, but um, in good health and clear mind. So that's the that's the most recent people that I'm following in this role. Yeah.
Thank God. And then how has your experience with pilgrimage evolved during your time here, I suppose?
Yes, it has very much been an evolution. Um, and I suppose the motivation, just in terms of my own making of pilgrimage, uh, has has again been something that has shifted and evolved. Particularly in my earlier experiences as a pilgrim, I probably would have gone with a particular kind of intention in mind, something that I was praying for. For example, that year that I first did it, it was the year that I had done my O level. So I was praying for good results in my in my exams. Now,
Mhm.
whether God was meant to influence the marker or whatever, I don't know. But that was the way that it went. And over the years, again speaking as a pilgrim, I would often have gone with a particular intention in mind. I remember very vividly one particular year that a very good friend of mine, a priest ordained a few years after me, decided to leave ministry. And my pilgrimage that particular year was very much about coping with the emotion of that, and thinking to myself, oh gosh, if 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 he has left ministry, I mean, why am I still here? I mean, I would have somebody I would have respected and admired and so on. So, and Lough Derg made that particular experience of the pilgrimage and the follow up to it would have helped to see me through that and steady me about that. More often now, more recently, I don't go with any particular kind of intention, but I maybe bring a lot of intentions and think of a lot of people. And sometimes, sometimes God kind of takes a hand. I go with one intention in mind, or with nothing in particular in mind. And as the pilgrimage evolves, particularly some of our listeners, I'm sure Marcus will be familiar with the shape of the pilgrimage, the 3-day pilgrimage, and how there is a visual of 24 hours when you're awake and in prayer kind of all night, and during the night there's time for things to evolve, and who knows where God can take us and what his agenda might be. So I mean, the pilgrim's agenda is one thing, and the Lord's agenda is another thing. And please God, it's the meeting of those two that make the difference. So that's about my experience as a pilgrim. About my experience then as a priest working on the pilgrimage. Again, there's very much been an evolution there. My earlier years working on Lough Derg would have seen me there as well. I was in a teaching role. I was teaching in a secondary school, boarding school, and so the 6 weeks that I would have done on Lough Derg would have been a complement to that, a kind of a different kind of pastoral experience. And I suppose over the years in particular, I would often, when people ask me about Lough Derg, that I would often find myself talking about how I learned to listen to people on Lough Derg in a new way. So perhaps somebody who came to me for confession was talking about something, and in the context just of the meeting for the confession, there was more to do, or maybe they said, well, could we continue this conversation, or could we meet outside, or maybe sometimes if I felt the pilgrim was open to it, I might say, well, we can deal with this as confession. We can complete the confession, and we can meet later then if you like to talk a bit further. So as I say, I learned that deeper listening to people. I learned in particular that I didn't need to have the answers for people, that it wasn't necessarily answers that they expected of me, but to have a chance to unpack and explore whatever it was. And about 10, maybe, gosh, nearly 15 years ago now, I took on a training as in spiritual direction. And again, that came out partly just from my own experience of how the value I put on spiritual direction in my own life. But also I kind of I would see now, and looking back when I did the training for spiritual direction, I was very conscious often that Lough Derg and my experience of listening to people, Lough Derg, and accompanying people on Lough Derg had given me a kind of an experiential foundation on which to build in terms of the ministry of spiritual direction. And what else was in it? Well, in terms of theology, liturgy and liturgical music are my areas of particular interest. So Lough Derg gave me a chance for that, particularly with under Father McSorley's time as prior. He very much encouraged me and very much was in and said, look at lad, this is your area. You know, whatever suggestions you have to make, or kind of whatever we need on Lough Derg in terms of like when there was a lot of new liturgical music coming out in the 1980s, and I used to be the one who would identify and put together a team who would, look after, organists and cantors to inspire the singing. And so that was another piece of it. History was I did history in my primary degree, and again became fascinated with the history of Lough Derg, and Bishop Joe Duffy, who again in my very earliest years was working there as an assisting priest, and so again he would have encouraged me in that. And another thing I would say is that I've always found over the years, people sometimes kind of say to me, oh God, it must be hard on Lough Derg, or kind of people sometimes worry about how limited it is, or whatever. Lough Derg, I have always found an easy place to minister. The hardest aspect of priestly ministry, well, don't let me overstate it, but one of the challenges, let me put it that way, in priestly ministry is finding the connection with people. And in a place of pilgrim, particularly it's my experience of Lough Derg, people who come to Lough Derg, and somehow they have given themselves up, so they come already motivated. Some of them are bringing something in particular that they want God's help with, and others just want something more Christ, or whatever that might be. But so people come with by and large with a great openness, and that's where in ministry a priest might often have to do the hard work to reach out to people to find how best to engage with people, whereas the openness that pilgrims bring, that piece of the hard work is done. Yeah.
It's lovely. Thank you for sharing, Father. I appreciate that. And you touched upon the historical element there. I'd love to look a bit more at the historical context of Lough Derg and talk about some of the key elements that I find fascinating also. So, St. Davog's Monastery, then, can you tell us a little bit about the original monastery founded by St. Davog and its significance in early Irish Christian life?
Now, getting me started on history is a very easy thing, but getting me stopped mightn't be so easy, Marcus. So keep me right. St. Davog is remembered as a younger companion of St. Patrick. One of his lives, there are two lives that have come down to us, not contemporary with Davog. Davog lived around about the year 500 in very general terms, so the generation following Patrick, and he's remembered as the founder of the monastery at Lough Derg, which was on what was called through history Davog's Island, or more recently Saint's Island. And so that's an island of about 10 acres where the community lived. And then the island where the pilgrimage now takes place is called Station Island, a much smaller island, the island furthest from the shore, and originally just a rocky little island where the bedrock of the lake broke the lake water. And a lot of the monasteries in medieval Ireland had a place apart from the main monastery where the monks might go for their more intense times of prayer and, I suppose, what we call retreat and penance and so on. And very often in Irish place names, you'll hear this word dysart or G-shirt in Irish, which comes from the word for a desert in Latin. So this is the place apart. And so it seems that Station Island was the G-shirt for the monks on the bigger island. And there was in through medieval times, there was the practice of pilgrimage was strong between the Irish monasteries, and monks might go to another monastery for a time and have an experience in their place of G-shirt, their place apart. And lay people might also sometimes come to a monastery and on pilgrimage, and uh, so the foundations seem to emerge in the historical record some way like that. And it's at the risk of maybe scandalizing some of those who are hearing us, Marcus, it was the 12th century, it was the 1100s before the name of Patrick became associated with Lough Derg. Before that, it was always Davog, and the whole area was known as Termon Davog, Davog's sanctuary. It was sanctuary area, and then there was a change in the 12th century was a period of reform in Christian life in Ireland, and part of that reform involved the Celtic monasteries had kind of run out of steam a bit, and part of the strategy of people like Lawrence O'Toole and Malachy and Armagh was to introduce some of the vibrant uh, orders from the continent, and so we had the Cistercians and the canons regular of St. Augustine, in particular, who were very numerous, and it was they who took over then leadership, and their rule came into the monastery at Lough Derg, and it was under their leadership that Lough Derg moves into the wider European consciousness associated with what was called the Purgatory of St. Patrick. And I think it's about 1160 before we have the first, if you like, when the foundation story of St. Patrick's Purgatory emerges in what's commonly referred to as the Tractatus. This was the story of a knight who had been involved in the Crusades and so on. It's shed a lot of blood, and wanted to make his peace with God in the later part of his life, and who came to Lough Derg to enter St. Patrick's Purgatory with the hope of making his peace with God. And he told the story of his time in the Purgatory, in the cave that was part of this G-shirt experience. And the monk to whom the knight told the story put it in writing as if you like, a story for spiritual reading for monasteries. And some of the scholars who've worked on it say that there's evidence that this would have been a text that was read, while the monks were maybe eating their meals in silence, and they had a devotional or inspiring text being read, and it spread across Europe, first of all in the monasteries, and then into the wider consciousness, the idea. And in the foundation story, which is part of that text, it says that God gave this place to St. Patrick in answer to Patrick's prayer that the Lord might show him some way to convince the Irish of the goodness of God and the truth of the Christian message. Interestingly, it's in the 12th century that the concept of purgatory, the theological concept of purgatory, emerges in European theology for the first millennium, let's say, in terms of what we call eschatology, the mystery of life beyond death, life. There were two options: heaven above and hell below. And it was in the 12th century that this is a very short version of the story now, that there emerged into Christian thinking this idea that a merciful God, so if somebody wasn't irredeemably wicked to be consigned to to hell, or superbly good to be able to go straight to heaven, that beyond this life, just as we can grow in faithfulness and in devotion and in the Christian virtues and in closeness to God, as we make our way through this life, that beyond uh, bodily death, there would be an opportunity by God's mercy to um, be redeemed from the remaining traces of selfishness and sin, and to be purified. So purgatory is about purifying, to be sufficiently purified to be admitted to the joy of eternal life with God. Um, so that's how it emerged into Christian consciousness in the Middle Ages, and that Tractatus, that story, uh, even still today, I forget what the number is. Certainly, it goes into the hundreds, maybe 200 and something manuscripts in libraries and so on across archives across Europe that still have traces of that story. So it was very, very widespread, and several in the Middle Ages. Several we have whatever it is, something like 39 named fairly high status pilgrims who came to St. Patrick's Purgatory and um, spent their 24 hours in the Purgatory cave and lived to tell the tale,
That's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, Father La. And one element that appeals to me, there's this idea in G.K. Chesterton where he talks about the democracy of the dead and giving our ancestors a vote, so to speak, including them in our thinking and being aware of them, so we're not just stuck in the present age, so to speak. So I suppose with that in mind, how do figures like St. Davog and St. Patrick, whom we mentioned, maybe serve as models for us today, especially in light of the upcoming Jubilee year and the central theme of Pilgrims of Hope?
Hmm. Yes, so, well, um, Davog, I suppose, if we think of him now as this companion, St. Patrick, this younger companion of St. Patrick, now if you like, the later legendary stuff would have kind of Patrick appointing Davog to, you're going to stay at Lough Derg and found your monastery there. Uh, but in already in Patrick's own lifetime, in the Confession of St. Patrick, which is, no scholar now disputes that is authentically the writing of Patrick. And clearly in the Confession, the monastic life is already in the time of Patrick begins to flourish. He talks about his wonder that the sons and daughters of Irish kings and chieftains are committing themselves to live as monks and virgins of Christ. That's the language that he uses. But anyway, Davog, as I say, as the founder. So for our contemporaries, there's something about the stepping away from the flow of of normal life and from what Davog might otherwise have been at, to this more remote place, and that there he certainly connects deeply with nature and has time for the deeper things and the inner things. And so, in that sense, for us and for our contemporaries, where we can become so involved in the immediate and in a society where so many of us feel the need to be continually entertained. So that, I mean, there has to be, I have to have my mobile phone kind of there. It's on silence at the moment, right? But I have to have it within reach, and uh, and so pilgrims who come to, one of the things we ask them is to lay aside their mobile devices and so on. And it's interesting that um, that they're as kind of say, even over the 7 years that I've been prior, there's less resistance now among pilgrims to our request that people would lay aside their phones. They're more ready to do it, and I think it's a growing sense that people have that oh, a little while without it would be good for me. So so this thing of us needing continually to be distracted, be entertained, where for some people, every thing, tittle tattle that they're doing, has to be shared with somebody and so on. So kind of Davog and people like that who step out of the flow and connect with the deeper things and the lasting things. Sometimes in Lough Derg we name it as what is true and lasting and worthy of our attention. What is true and lasting and worthy of our attention. These are the spiritual things. Patrick, well, again, Patrick is so much. Patrick was enslaved as a teenager. Slavery is far from a thing of the past. The figures of that are estimated that find themselves in some form of slavery, whether it's sexual or employment terms or whatever. People from difficult situations who migrate in the hope of a better life and find themselves in the hands of traffickers. And this is a huge thing of our time. So I mean, Patrick knew what it was to be enslaved and to be trafficked, and spent 6 years before he escaped, and then chose to come back to Ireland to bring Christian faith to Ireland. So that element of somebody who knew what it was to be trafficked and to be enslaved is one piece of it. The whole issue and the reality of people on the move, migrants, for all sorts of reasons, and the issues today, and I say across so many places, but particularly here in Ireland, of the welcome that our bishops recently have produced a pastor on this, the welcome that we give to migrants and so on, and how then, as this meets our own difficulties with the housing crisis and all of that, how maybe that's wearing thin. And I mean, some voices are kind of saying, oh, these people are taking over our resources and our jobs and so on. So I mean, that's a whole issue where Patrick has something to say to it, and not to forget the missionary side. Patrick has got something in terms of his relationship with Christ and discovering God as a father and being guided by the Spirit. Patrick has got something that he can't keep to himself, that he just has to share. And again, Pope Francis leads us very strongly on this, that every baptized Christian, Francis would have us reflect, is by definition a missionary Christian. That if we really have got it, if the gospel has got to us, you couldn't possibly keep it to yourself. You just have to share it. And again, not the least of it is in as you will know, many of our listeners will probably know, the coming Jubilee year 2025 is a Jubilee year, a holy year. The theme that the Holy Father has offered us is Pilgrims of Hope. And again, one of his own what desires or the graces that he hopes for the church in the Jubilee year is that we will rediscover our own hope. There's a lovely paragraph in it where he talks about, everybody knows what it is to hope, but everybody finds out also that we can't take hope for granted, that the challenges of life, the difficulties that come our way, the disasters that natural and otherwise that can befall us can challenge our hope. But faith supports hope, and he quotes that piece from St. Paul that patience, that we learn patience by what we have to endure, and that rebuilds hope. So that part of the Holy Father's aim for the year is that that we will rediscover a Christian hope, and that we will be bearers of hope to the world around us. And again, this is not about going necessarily to the ends of the earth. Lots of people in our own situations find themselves marginalized, struggling on the edge of things in so many ways. And there's a lovely, again, one of the paragraphs in his letter calling us to share in the Jubilee year, where he talks about the hope that we can bring in very ordinary ways, that we can take the trouble to smile at each other rather than passing by somebody maybe who's down and out or whatever. We can make eye contact, we can engage, we can. So there's please God, our pilgrims who again, pilgrimage is one of the big themes always of a Jubilee year, of a holy year. So please God, apart from, we would usually, our numbers, we'd have about over 7,000 people who come to Lough Derg on pilgrimage each year. So we hope that this year they will come in that spirit of as pilgrims of hope, and that maybe the Holy Father's call for the Jubilee year, the Holy Year, and the pilgrim spirit, that we might have a few new visitors, a few more visitors.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Father La, and God willing. And another element I'd love to touch upon are some of the challenges and changes at Lough Derg over the centuries. So thank God in Ireland we've come a long way, even amongst Christians. There's greater relationships between Catholics and Protestants, and now increasingly Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox and so on. But I have a number of Protestant friends who've actually communicated that they would love to come to Lough Derg, and it is quite clear that even though it has a distinct Catholic identity, it's open to other Christians, and we have many riches to offer. People are interested in Mary Clark windows and all sorts. But unfortunately, historically, challenges like the Reformation, things weren't always the same. She might speak to that and maybe some of the challenges that the Reformation, for example, posed to the pilgrimage tradition in Lough Derg, and what saw Lough Derg through that difficult period then.
Yes, well, the reformers, because in the in Reformation times, the early 1500s, and so on. Again, one of the things in the Christian Church in Europe at that time that was seen to be in need of reform was actually abuses around pilgrimage, around places of pilgrimage where people went on pilgrimage, and in a very crude kind of way, to give donations of money to the pilgrimage or to the shrine or whatever. That in a crude sense, this was seen as buying indulgence. That in terms of our loved ones who had died and so on. Now, clearly that is an abuse, nothing less. And so the reformers set themselves by and large, against pilgrimage, the Reformation times, so kind of the 1600s, during the time of in Ireland, what we refer to as penal times, the penal laws, determination by the Protestant authorities and the civil authorities to put an end to places like Lough Derg, and in particular, they saw St. Patrick's Purgatory as one of the worst in terms of and its popularity at that time also kind of troubled them. So there were particularly in 1632 there were two serious attempts made to put an end to the place for once and for all, but it didn't happen. And I'm always a bit amused that, more than a bit amused, that part of what made it difficult to close down Lough Derg was that those who had control of the place at the time, so we're talking now about in the Reformed kind of situation, there was money to be made in ferrying pilgrims across to the island. And so when the Protestant authorities and the civil authorities insisted that James McGrath, who was the landlord, let's call him that at the time, would stop ferrying people, and they impose a big fine on him, kind of, that he would forfeit if he was caught carrying pilgrims. But it was too important. And he sold out his title at that time to Bishop Spottiswoode, the Protestant bishop, the Church of Ireland bishop in Clogher. But in time, then it passed to the Leslies. A later bishop was a Leslie, and so on. And although officially everybody was against it, there was still money to be made. And so the very abuse that those initial reformers had against places of pilgrimage, that they were being used as money-making things, there was still money to be made. And so it was money making in some sense that kept the place going on the other side, but it was no longer Lough Derg that was making the money. Anyway, that's but to go back to the bigger piece of your question, in 1714, the then Bishop of Clogher, and again this is in penal times, comes in disguise to Lough Derg. He's preparing his report for Rome on the state of the diocese, and one of the things he wants to report on is Lough Derg. He comes in disguise, disguised as a merchant, to Lough Derg. He gets accommodation with the local Protestant pastor, who treats him very kindly, and he finds that Lough Derg is still going strong, and there's great devotion there. And in fact, over the following years, the Lough Derg doesn't get grief, if you like, from the local Protestant leadership or the local Protestant community. And thanks be to God, in more contemporary terms now, like we always have a day of friendship and prayer, we call it. This goes back to the year 2000, the millennium year, the Great Jubilee year, when for the first time Lough Derg hosted an ecumenical day. I was there for it, and it was an amazing day, and so that has led to an annual ecumenical day, and we would have, not in big numbers, but even in terms of the traditional pilgrimage, we have people from other Christian traditions who come, some of them who come regularly. and we have people who are not Christians. Certainly, I can think of two Buddhists that I know that separately who come to Lough Derg every year, and inquirers come, and people can come and kind of say, look at that, sometimes they're very, put their hands up by that, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Catholic, is it okay for me to come? And so thank God we have moved beyond that, and hopefully we can make some contribution to improved understanding and improved relationships across those sad ancient divisions. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Father Law. And another element that I'd love to get into is distinctly pertaining to spiritual growth. So that's something that you and I have spoken about in the past. And even in introducing young people to the island, for example, I've mentioned the fact that this is not just a place of escapism, but hopefully of transformation. I wonder, maybe from your perspective, what moral and spiritual lessons do you believe that pilgrims can and often do take away from their time on the island that can then inform their daily lives?
Hmm. Uh, Very often when pilgrims say, uh, thinking now about the traditional 3-day pilgrimage, Marcus, um, as people are getting ready to leave on the third morning, and they're waiting for the boat, or so there's often a time there to just to mingle with people, and people very often volunteer something of what Lough Derg has done for them, or the good that they've wanted. They speak to us very often of peace. They speak to us about a spiritual lift, about new spiritual energy that they have gained. Some of them will speak about having moved on in some way, or if not a resolution to something that they are living with or struggling with, but a sense of moving on, a sense of you hope to find a way forward. We have during the 3-day pilgrimage, we offer uh, people a chance, if they want to have a word with somebody who's trained in counselling. Now that's obviously not, but again, it's as I see it, it's a significant and humble contribution in terms of somebody who is carrying something, or just wants somebody to listen to them. And again, sometimes it can happen that in the context of confession, somebody talks about something, and as a priest, you have the chance to say, well, look at, okay, we'll deal with the religious side of this, with the whatever might be there in terms of forgiveness that's required, or that people desire, or whatever. But maybe this is something that you might be worth your while to bring to. So that can sometimes be a significant experience for people. Just the stepping out of the everyday, the taking time. Can people speak to us often about the beauty of Lough Derg, the natural beauty of Lough Derg. Now, I myself wouldn't be promoting Lough Derg as a tourist attraction, and like, I mean, really, there's nothing dramatic. There's no dramatic beauty about Lough Derg. I mean, the if you want mountains, there's plenty of real mountains. They're humble enough little hills around the place, and and not very much. But there's something about being away. There's something about being on an island, and something about like, I mean, you see pilgrims just sitting watching the water of the lake, gazing around. So it's about something about reconnecting and the value of space and time. And again, one of the things that I sometimes hear myself saying is that I'm a great believer that anybody who's resourceful enough to find the 3 days in their year or in their summer, or what passes as a summer in Ireland, to do the pilgrimage on Lough Derg has to be resourceful enough to find that bit of space in their lives, their time for an act of worship on Sunday, their daily time for just entering the presence of the Lord, who is around us and deep within us. Again, for some people, again, we would put a lot of store on how we celebrate liturgy on Lough Derg, and whether it's in terms of Mass, of the daily Eucharist, or perhaps the devotional time in the evening at night prayer and exposition and so on. These things speak to people, and maybe they rediscover something or other, or they go to St. Mary's and spend some time in adoration, in the presence of the Eucharist, and it reawakens in them maybe their taste for adoration. These are some of the things that just occurred to me in terms of the question that you asked there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Father Lough. And mentioned the stained glass windows of Harry Clark in this conversation just briefly. I wonder if you might speak to some of the notable artistic or architectural features that we have in the island that maybe contribute to its spiritual atmosphere. I think for me, that's vital and kind of often understated in cultivating an experience of beauty. And of course, for those who are into theology and classical education and so on, that's a central element alongside truth and goodness. And you hear Bishop Barron, folks like that, talk about evangelizing true beauty, even. So I wonder if you might touch upon that.
Yeah, well, I suppose the most striking uh, aspect of that on Lough Derg is that we have these 14 stained glass windows by Harry Clark. Um, and I mean, they're regarded as real treasures. So these are 14 windows. The fact that there are 14 uh, suggested fairly obvious that the theme for the windows would be the 14 stations of the Way of the Cross. The challenge for Harry Clark was that the shape of the windows, they're tall and narrow. That's just what dimensions you put on them, but they weren't. I mean, to depict, say, one of the stations of the cross, Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. You probably would be going for landscape rather than portrait. So what his way to resolve it was that he treated the theme of each station in an oval shape, but he had the oval held by the figure of one of the apostles, the 12 apostles, with St. Paul and Mary as Queen of Apostles to make the 14. So the figure of the apostle fills the shape of the window, and then in the center they hold the station. Now, they are breathtaking in their beauty, and he's such a master of color, particularly during the 3 day pilgrimage when the evenings are long and you're going into the basilica for night prayer in the evening at 9 o'clock. The sun is setting in the west. the light that comes through the west facing windows would simply take your breath away. The golds and the reds and the oranges, the garb on the saints, again the detail and the fantastical costumes. But then within the image of the station, the vividness of those and the details in those. And again, one of the pieces about Harry Clark, not seen so much in his, I suppose, in his religious art, more associated maybe with his more secular commissions and with his illustrations, because he was a marvelous illustrator as well, is the demonic aspect in faces and so on. So, I mean, those who are in the Station of the Cross, who are the high priests or the Roman soldiers or whatever, they are really quite demonic, and so that's I mean, you can hear my enthusiasm for the Harry. But one of the amazing things is Harry Clark never saw them. He was already quite ill, and he got the commission, and he was in Switzerland, went to Switzerland for treatment for his chest troubles, and sent the cartoons home to the studio in Dublin to be created. So Harry Clark himself never saw these marvelous windows. The Basilica, the work of Professor Scott, opened in around about 1930. We're just coming up towards the centenary. Again, it's an amazing construction, even, and a beautiful building in a very sober kind of way. So yeah, the elements of beauty there. And I mean, sometimes we get people who approach us to make an arrangement that they might come over just to see the windows. You know, they've seen representations of them or whatever, but just to see them themselves. And again, our pilgrims. But this is an important thing. Our pilgrims, the praying of the Way of the Cross is part of the 3-day pilgrimage at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But even outside of that, pilgrims, you see pilgrims going around them, taking their time with them, just contemplating them and drawn by, as you say, by the beauty of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it also has a powerful dimension that is unveiled in Michael Davis's recent meditation, which he was kind enough to send to us at Lough Derg, and what it means to people beyond aesthetically. She was wrestling with the grief of losing her mother, and she offered this powerful meditation, inspired in part by the Harry Clark windows. So it's not just highbrow, so to speak, and it is for the common people, as you suggest. And I think I'd recommend that as a means for them to engage with that as a first point. And just as we come to the close of our time this morning, this afternoon, Father La, ask you about some of the new prospects. So, like many places with unfortunate COVID, Derg suffered and struggled, but also, thank God, came up with some new initiatives, and there's new prospects developed. So one of those was the Pilgrim Walk, which I know is dear to your heart. I wonder if you might speak to that and other initiatives like that, if you wish, and how they might inform or impact the future of pilgrimage at Lough Derg alongside our traditional.
Yeah. Since so the um, the survey that was done in the 1830s, the ordnance survey teams, they could see when they were doing their surveying in this area, they discovered that there were traces of a paved medieval path that pilgrims would have used to come to Lough Derg, and those traces are clearly there in that survey. Now, they have since disappeared, so that you no longer on the ground can find those traces. The whole area was was forested in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. So those traces have disappeared. But in the late 1990s, Lough Derg was one of 5 places in the country identified by the Irish Tourist Board at the time to develop a pilgrim path. And so there's a pilgrim path on the shore of the lake. In the period, and we had when I came in as prior in 2017, I kind of thought that this is worthy of further development. But as it happened, we were just ready to go with that, and that we had information boards commissioned and ready for delivery when the whole country went into lockdown in 2020 with the COVID thing. And then it became clear that we weren't going to be able to open the island. But as lockdown began to be relaxed a little bit, small numbers of people could meet out of doors. I think it was maybe 15 was the ceiling at some initial time. So we put up those information boards, and we developed a walking pilgrimage along that pilgrim path. And myself and a number of our other team at the time would accompany pilgrims on it. And apart from telling the history of Lough Derg, I mean, invite people to engage with what they could see in terms of nature and the flowers and that were in season, or the plants that were in season, the trees, and there are several new unexpected views across to Station Island from the different aspects of the path. And it comes at the far end of it is the point where the place where pilgrims originally crossed over from to the island, and there are the remains of a causeway that served to give pedestrian access to Saints Island, where the monastery was for some time in the Middle Ages. So we developed a walking pilgrimage on that, and that we still offer that. But I mean that's open all year round, even when the island as such is closed. And there's a guide and a little prayer support for people who want to pick that up and to walk the path. In the year 2000, as part of Jubilee year 2000, Father Moan, who was the prior at that time, waymarked a walking pilgrimage path from the village of Pettigo here, beginning at the local Catholic Church, to the shore of the lake. And he marked that with marker stones. So we have just had them refurbished to reconstitute and give new life to that initiative. And we've also been in touch with the pilgrimage authorities on the Camino of Santiago, and we've had visits from them here with the hope that beginning at a place that we call here the Waterfoot, where pilgrims who approach Lough Derg and St. Patrick's Purgatory down the Erne waterway would have come ashore and started their journey to the island. We've currently a project on to get accreditation from the Camino authorities that pilgrims, that there might be a route from Lough Derg from Lough Erne to Lough Derg that would where you could get your stamps and add it then to the walk that you would do in Spain on the Camino itself. So those are some of the new offerings that we're currently working on. Yeah.
That's marvelous. Thank you, Father La, and all very exciting. So, I suppose in closing, then, what invitation would you extend to those who are maybe considering a pilgrimage to Lough Derg? Maybe they've heard mommy or daddy, grandfather, father, grandmother talking about it, and what can they expect from their time on the island then?
Well, we got a great gift. Again, it was just the year that I came in as prior, and an article was published uh, in a national newspaper, and the about Lough Derg, a lovely 2-page spread in the weekend supplement. But the title that the sub editor put on it was Lough Derg, the Iron Man of pilgrimages. So we took that very much on board as if you like, as a catchphrase, particularly for younger pilgrims who kind of are up for something that has a bit of a challenge in it. Now, in some sense, I think again that's overstated. I mean, I'm in my mid 70s, and I do the 3-day pilgrimage every year, and I'm certainly not somebody to take on any kind of an Ironman undertaking. But there is a challenge in it, and the challenge is be less in the physicality of it and more in the spirituality of it, and it can teach us endurance. It can teach us resilience. Um, you can meet wonderful people in your pilgrim group. That the conversations that you have with them can take you by surprise. Um, you're talking about what it might offer to young people. Just it brings to mind, Marcus, um, two young people who got engaged about 12 months ago and who met on Lough Derg when they came to do the pilgrimage. So who knows what it might offer.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Father. I most appreciate that. And where can viewers or listeners then find out more about Lough Derg?
Oh, Lough Derg, www.loughderg.org is our website, and you can find us there.
Terrific. Thank you so much for your time today, Father La, and God bless you and God bless the mission of Lough Derg.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for joining our team. And I look forward to an engagement, a warm engagement with you, please God, in the years ahead.